was the first act quartet from Beethoven's only opera, Fidelio, an inspiring tale that is a testimony to liberty and political freedom and the power of love. It's a fine way to welcome you to this evening in which we'll highlight works from Lyric Opera's upcoming 2019-2020 season, as well as other works from the world of opera, operetta, and musical theater. Part of what makes opera so exciting is that it involves the greatest instrument there is, the human voice. Alas, that great instrument is as delicate as the finest Stradivarius. Unfortunately, our good friends, tenor Ken Donovan and Rose Guccione, have both been stricken with sinus infections and are unable to sing. Happily, John Concepcion and Kimberly McCord have agreed to step in, for which we are very grateful. Beethoven's Fidelio was a critical success from its first performance in 1814, and it quickly became a part of the standard operatic repertoire. While the next opera we'll preview this evening is much beloved and one of the most frequently performed operas today, it had a premiere that was one of the most notorious fiascos in the history of opera. Rossini's The Barber of Seville had all the makings to be a great success. It draws its inspiration from the first part of Beaumarchais' popular Figaro trilogy. It includes well-known archetypal characters from Italian commedia dell'arte and even some references to ancient Roman comedies. It's an age-old tale of a foolish old man having designs on a lovely young woman who is in love with a dashing young man. What could possibly go wrong? Well, at its premiere in February of 1816, a lot. The first problem was that another composer, popular at the time, had already composed an opera based on the same story. That composer's devotees, or claque, showed up to the opening performance ready to disrupt it. Rossini, who was in the pit, described it thus: "The eventful first night arrived at last, and throughout my artistic career, I have never experienced a more stormy evening. It was not the hostile party alone, but a whole series of mishaps which contributed to the great fiasco of my opera. The overture was completely drowned out, as well as the first chorus, by the hissing and whistling of the public," those Italian opera audiences. At this act of injustice, Garcia, the tenor playing the dashing young count, beside himself with anger, grew so excited that he broke several strings of his guitar while accompanying the serenade. This caused such a disturbance that nothing more of the music could be heard. Poor Basilio became so alarmed at the uproar that he trod on his long cloak and fell flat on the stage. When he got up, his nose was bleeding so profusely that it was some minutes before he was able to sing. The noise then grew terrific. Finally, just as the public were quieting down, a cat suddenly appeared on the stage and was only driven off again with much trouble and loss of time. Thus was the unfortunate evening brought to a climax. The curtain fell and the performance was stopped. Rossini was so distressed that he begged the theater management to let him out of conducting the second performance and stayed at home. However, during intermission of that second performance, the great, impassioned, and fickle entity that is an Italian opera audience coursed through the streets of Rome to arrive at Rossini's house with torches and carried him in triumph and in his dressing gown to the opera house, and he conducted the second act. The story is set in 17th century Spain and revolves around one of the most beloved characters in all opera, the jack of all trades, Figaro. In his entrance aria, Figaro recounts how everyone in the city looks to him to help not only for the standard activities of his trade, but also for solving problems, carrying messages, and arranging assignations. Sure enough, the Count Almaviva comes to Figaro for help. Almaviva, in disguise, has been attempting to win through song the lovely Rosina, who is the ward of Dr. Bartolo. Once the coast is clear, Rosina tells us that the voice she just heard below her window, that of the Count, has echoed in her heart. She determines that this man will be hers and that she will outsmart her aged suitor. Here now is Figaro's entrance aria, Largo al factotum, and Rosina's aria, Una voce poco fa. saying that if she refuses to offer him solace, he will die. Mozart gives this serenade an affected simplicity, and as such shows us just how conniving and clever Giovanni is, as that simplicity is something that might appeal, especially to a simple serving girl. In the second selection, lovely and long lyrical lines are used to seduce another woman of so-called low birth, Zerlina, on her wedding day, no less, having told her that she should be setting her sights higher than the poor and undistinguished Mazzetto. Giovanni lures her into a duet, saying that in his nearby villa, she will take his hand and they will be joined in marriage. While initially dubious, his seductive flattery and offer of riches wins her over, and she reluctantly gives in. From Act 2 of Don Giovanni, we'll hear the serenade De Vieni alla Finestra, and from Act 1, the duet La ci darem la mano.
Oh
Puccini, despite his success, particularly with La Bohème, he was always insecure about his craft. However, with the premiere of Butterfly, he was uncharacteristically confident. He wrote to his leading lady, Rosina Storchio, the day of the premiere, quote, "My good wishes are not necessary. So true, so fine, so moving is your wonderful art that the public must succumb to it. I hope that through you, I will gain my victory." Until tonight, then, with confidence and much affection, Giacomo Puccini. Night came. During the beginning of the first act, the audience was stone silent, a very bad sign for an Italian audience. After Butterfly enters, the audience turned nasty. "This is Bohème," they started shouting. "Give us something new." Then there was silence again, and at the end of the first act, after the rapturous love duet, there was very sparse applause as the curtain came down. Things got worse in the second act. Rude comments from the audience peppered the act. Even the most famous aria, arguably one of the most stirring and moving that Puccini ever wrote, Un bel dì, was met with barely a sound. However, when Butterfly brought out Pinkerton, her and Pinkerton's child, pandemonium broke out. Grunts, growls, laughter, ironic cries, obscene remarks were hurled at the stage. When the audience heard Puccini's innovative bird calls during the now famous intermezzo, they started barking like dogs, making sounds of roosters, donkeys, cows, as if, Storchio said later, dawn in Japan were taking place in Noah's Ark. Nothing from then on failed to evoke laughter, not even the suicide at the end of the opera. The performance ended without a single curtain call. How could this have happened? For anyone who has experienced Butterfly, it's unimaginable. As is probably true for many an opera fan, Butterfly was my gateway into the world of opera. It was the first opera I ever really watched closely and paid attention to, and it made me realize how amazing this art form could be. The famous RCA recording playing King Price and Richard Tucker was the first complete opera recording I ever owned. This story of the young Japanese geisha who has fallen so madly in love with the American Navy man Benjamin Franklin Pinkerton that she has renounced her religion and her family for the sake of this love is moving and beautiful. In the second act, with Pinkerton gone for 3 years, she sings the aria Un bel dì, an aria so filled with hope in the face of fear and loss that we as an audience can't help but reflect on those times in our lives when we face similar doubts and trepidation. And her final act of turning over her child to his father and his father's American wife is at once noble and utterly heartbreaking. Happily, the second performance of Butterfly was an entirely different affair from its opening night. Puccini had revised the score and booked a less high-profile venue, not La Scala, but Brescia. From the first few moments when the audience applauded the scenery throughout the opera, this Butterfly was a resounding success. We'll hear 2 selections from Butterfly tonight. Pinkerton's aria from the third act, in which he says farewell to the flowery refuge that was their home, and admits with remorse that he will be haunted by Butterfly's face for the rest of his life. And we'll also hear the famous second act aria, in which Butterfly rebukes her servant Suzuki for not believing that Pinkerton will return. She describes in poignant, hopeful detail her dreams of seeing his ship sail into the harbor and of spotting him in the crowd, climbing the hills to embrace her. Here now is Addio fiorito asil and Un bel dì vedremo. opera. However, Tchaikovsky, working with his own brother as librettist, turned the story into grand opera. The story involves Herman, a young soldier who has fallen in love with Lisa, a woman of noble birth who is already engaged to a dashing prince. Lisa's grandmother has been given a mysterious secret of winning at cards and is thus known as the Queen of Spades. Herman becomes obsessed with learning the secret and confronts the old woman at gunpoint, but she dies of fright. Eventually, the old woman's ghost appears, announcing that, against her will, she must tell him the secret so that he can marry and save Lisa. Dazed, Herman repeats the 3 cards, 3, 7, ace. It is all to no avail. Lisa, realizing that Herman was only interested in the gambling secret, and seeing Herman's descent into madness, kills herself. At the end of the opera, Herman finds himself in a gambling match with Lisa's abandoned lover, the prince. Herman dutifully plays the first 2 rounds and wins, but for the 3rd round, instead of the ace, it is discovered that he is holding the Queen of Spades. Seeing the Countess's ghost, laughing at her vengeance, Herman too kills himself. In telling this story, Tchaikovsky interweaves his score with folk, popular, and salon music, and even Russian chant, along with innovative compositional techniques to evoke the otherworldly. As one critic noted, the result is a study in deception, ambiguity, and hidden meanings. Among the opera's more prominent qualities is a feeling of evolution, light to darkness, real world to other world, liveliness to tragedy, life to death. We'll hear one of the folk-like songs that encapsulates this theme of contrast. In the first act, Lisa's maid, Pauline, sings a plaintive song about a person who, like them, is enjoying life. However, the song admonishes that the only reward for that enjoyment is death. So wonderfully and darkly Russian. Here now is Pauline's song from the first act of Queen of Spades. consider a 21st century version of Verismo, Dead Man Walking. The opera is composed by Jake Heggie. That name might ring a bell. Chicago Opera Theater just performed another of his operas, Moby Dick. The libretto for Dead Man Walking was written by the well-known Tony Award-winning playwright Terence McNally and is based on Sister Helen Réjean's memoir that was also the basis for the Oscar-winning movie of the same name. The opera recounts Sister Helen's courageous struggle to provide spiritual guidance to a condemned Louisiana murderer in the months leading up to his execution. Since its successful premiere in October 2000 in San Francisco, Dead Man Walking has become one of the most often performed contemporary operas. In Act 1, Sister Helen has received a request from Joseph de Rocher, a prisoner on death row, asking her to become his spiritual advisor through his execution. On the drive to Louisiana State Penitentiary, she likens her journey to the prison with her own spiritual journey to Christ. Here to end the first half of the concert is this journey from Act 1 of Dead Man Walking.